The hum of Damon Keller's tools echoed in the small, dimly lit workshop of his space cruiser. Nestled in a quiet asteroid belt far from bustling trade routes, the cruiser was his sanctuary. Damon liked it that way. No noisy crowds, no complicated politics. Just him, his work, and the stars. But today, the silence was shattered by a fiery streak across the dark expanse of space. Damon squinted through the cruiser's viewing screen, spotting a sleek alien ship spiraling out of control. "Great," he muttered, setting down his wrench. Crashes were rare in this part of the galaxy. Whoever was piloting that ship wasn't from around here, or they were just reckless. Moments later, the alien ship collided with a nearby asteroid, breaking apart. Damon's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't one to get involved, but leaving someone to die out there didn't sit right with him. Grabbing his gear, he powered up his cruiser and set a course for the wreckage. The alien ship's hull was cracked, glowing faintly with unfamiliar energy. Damon maneuvered his cruiser closer and activated his scanner. A faint life signal blinked on the screen. "Guess I've got work to do," he muttered, suiting up and stepping into the airlock. Inside the wrecked ship, Damon found a figure slumped against the control panel. She was tall and humanoid, but her violet skin shimmered faintly under the dim emergency lights. Her silvery hair framed her face, and despite her injuries, her features were sharp and commanding. "Hey," Damon called out, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, a piercing gold that seemed to see right through him. She tried to speak, but her voice was faint and strained. "You must help," she managed, before slipping into unconsciousness. Damon cursed under his breath. He wasn't a doctor, but he could at least stabilize her until she woke up. Carefully, he carried her back to his cruiser, placing her in the medical bay. As he worked, Damon couldn't help but wonder who she was. Her ship's design was nothing like the ones he'd seen before. The markings on her suit hinted at something important, maybe royal or military. Hours later, the alien woman stirred. Damon was at the control panel when he heard her voice, stronger this time. "You've saved me," she said, sitting up slowly. Her gaze locked onto his, intense and unyielding. "Yeah, well," Damon replied, scratching the back of his neck. "Couldn't just leave you out there." She studied him for a moment, then spoke with a tone that carried both gratitude and authority. "I am Kalina of the Thalarin. My people owe you a great debt, but I owe you something far greater." Damon raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what does that mean?" Kalina's expression didn't waver. "Your objections are useless. You will be my husband." Damon froze, unsure whether to laugh, argue, or run. "Wait, what?" Kalina's golden eyes narrowed with determination. "It is decided." And just like that, Damon's quiet life became anything but ordinary. Damon stared at Kalina, his wrench still in hand, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "Wait a second. Husband, you've got to be kidding me." Kalina tilted her head, her golden eyes steady and unreadable. "I never jest about matters this serious. You saved my life. In Thalarin culture that binds us, you are now my mate." Damon took a step back, raising his hands. "Whoa, hold on. I just dragged you out of a wrecked ship. That's not exactly grounds for marriage." Kalina frowned, as if confused by his reaction. "Your actions were noble, human. Thalarin law dictates that a life saved must be honored. I am bound to you now. Why are you resisting?" Damon ran a hand through his short, unruly hair, trying to process what was happening. He had pulled an injured alien out of a wreck, thinking it was the right thing to do. And now she was telling him he was her husband. "Listen, Kalina," Damon began, struggling to keep his voice calm. "Where I come from, we don't just marry someone because we saved their life. That's not how it works." Kalina crossed her arms, her violet skin shimmering under the medbay lights. "Your customs are irrelevant. This is not negotiable." Damon sighed and leaned against the counter. "Why me? You don't even know who I am." For all you know, I could be a terrible person. Kalina's expression softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. You risked your safety for a stranger. That speaks volumes about your character. You are unique. Damon couldn't tell if she was complimenting him or insulting him. Okay, but can't we just, I don't know, call it even? You're alive, I helped, and now you can go back to your people or wherever you need to be. Kalina's demeanor changed instantly. Her face tightened, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. I cannot go back. My people, they will force me into a union I do not choose. I escaped to avoid that fate. Damon hesitated. For the first time, he saw something behind her confident exterior. Fear. Whatever she had run from must have been bad. I'm sorry about what you're going through, he said cautiously. But dragging me into it, that's not fair. Kalina stepped closer, her eyes almost pleading. It's not just fairness. If they find me, they will hunt you too. By claiming you as my mate, I protect you. They will have no choice but to recognize you as my equal. Damon blinked. So what you're saying is, marrying you is a shield. Kalina nodded, her determination returning. Exactly. Together, we can survive. Damon sighed deeply, shaking his head. This has to be the weirdest day of my life. Kalina allowed herself the faintest of smiles. You'll find I am full of surprises, husband. Don't call me that, Damon muttered. But deep down, he knew there was no escaping this bizarre new reality. Damon sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the glowing control panel of his cruiser. Kalina stood behind him, her arms crossed and her expression sharp as ever. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the occasional hum of the ship's systems. You still haven't explained what's so dangerous about your people, Damon said, finally breaking the tension. Why would they care if you're here or if I'm involved? Kalina's golden eyes narrowed. The Thal-Aran are powerful, but our society is rigid. Every life is tied to a purpose. Mine was to strengthen my family's alliances through a political marriage. She paused, her voice hardening. When I refused, they labeled me a traitor. Now they will stop at nothing to retrieve me and eliminate anyone who helps me. Damon's stomach twisted. So what you're saying is, just by helping you, I've painted a target on my back. Kalina nodded, her tone unapologetic. Correct. Which is why I insist you stay with me. Alone, you won't survive their wrath. Before Damon could respond, the ship's alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the control panel. Proximity alert, Damon muttered, his hands flying over the controls. The screen lit up, showing a sleek, black ship approaching at high speed. Its design was unmistakably alien, sleek and angular, like a predator closing in on its prey. They found me, Kalina said, her voice cold but calm. Great, Damon muttered sarcastically, flipping switches and powering up the cruiser's thrusters. Any chance they just want to talk. Kalina's expression didn't change. Thal-Aran don't negotiate. The pursuing ship fired a warning shot, a beam of energy narrowly missing Damon's cruiser. He cursed under his breath, pushing the throttle forward. Hold on, Damon yelled as the cruiser jolted forward, weaving through the asteroid field. The Thal-Aran ship followed closely, firing more shots that illuminated the dark void. Can't you tell them I'm not involved? Damon shouted over the alarms. Kalina raised an eyebrow. Would you believe a stranger if they claimed innocence in such a situation? Fair point, Damon grumbled. The ship shook violently as a near miss rocked their shields. Kalina gripped the back of Damon's chair, steadying herself. You're skilled, she remarked, watching as Damon maneuvered through narrow gaps between asteroids. Thanks, he said, his voice tense, but I'd rather not put my skills to the test right now. Kalina leaned forward, studying the control panel. Head toward that large asteroid. Use its gravity to slingshot us out of their firing range. Damon shot her a skeptical look but followed her advice. The cruiser dipped toward the asteroid, the gravity pulling them dangerously close before they shot out at a sharp angle. The Thalaran ship hesitated, misjudging the trajectory and losing ground. "We're clear, for now," Damon said, exhaling heavily as the alarms died down. Kalina stepped back, her expression unreadable. "This is why you're perfect, Damon. Together, we can survive anything." Damon groaned. "You really don't let up, do you?" Kalina smirked faintly. "Never." As the ship sped into the vast darkness, Damon realized his quiet life was well and truly over. Damon slumped back into his chair, letting out a long breath as the cruiser entered a quieter region of space. The adrenaline of the chase had drained him, leaving him exhausted and slightly annoyed at the alien woman standing across from him. "All right, Kalina," he said, rubbing his temples. "We're safe for now. Mind explaining what's next? Because I didn't sign up to play intergalactic hide-and-seek with your people." Kalina, ever composed, sat gracefully in the co-pilot's seat. "My plan is simple. Repair my ship and evade the Thalaran long enough to find refuge in neutral territory." "Simple," Damon repeated with a sarcastic chuckle. "Nothing about this situation is simple. And by the way, you still haven't answered my main question. Why me? Out of all the beings in the galaxy, why am I suddenly the chosen one?" Kalina tilted her head, her golden eyes studying him. "You misunderstand. This isn't about fate or destiny. It's about logic. You have demonstrated intelligence, resourcefulness, and bravery. Those qualities are rare, even among my people." Damon blinked, unsure if he should feel flattered or insulted. "So what you're saying is, I'm some kind of project for you? A convenient partner?" Kalina's expression softened slightly, though her tone remained firm. "You underestimate your own worth, Damon. Where I come from, partnerships are not based on fleeting emotions. They are strategic alliances meant to ensure survival and strength." "Sounds cold," Damon muttered, leaning back in his chair. "Humans aren't like that. We marry because of love, not because it's convenient." Kalina frowned, clearly perplexed. "Love? This concept holds great importance to your species, but it is unpredictable. Fragile. It lacks the stability my people value." Damon shook his head, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "That's because you're looking at it like it's some kind of equation. Love isn't supposed to be predictable. It's about connection, trust, and choice." Kalina's gaze didn't waver, but her silence spoke volumes. For a moment, the two of them sat in the quiet hum of the ship, their vastly different perspectives hanging in the air. Finally, she broke the silence. "You believe choice is more important than duty." "Every time," Damon said firmly. Kalina stood, pacing the small cabin. "If I had chosen my path, I would not be running for my life. I would not be hunted by my own family. Duty has shaped my existence, Damon. It is all I know." Damon watched her, a pang of sympathy creeping in despite his irritation. "Maybe it's time to change that. Maybe you don't have to let duty control you anymore." Kalina stopped, her expression unreadable. "You speak as though it's so simple, but breaking free of centuries-old traditions is not something easily done." "Nothing worth doing is ever easy," Damon replied, his voice softer now. Kalina turned to him, her gaze lingering. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is more to life than duty." For the first time, Damon saw a flicker of doubt in her confident exterior, a glimpse of someone struggling to find her own way. And though he didn't fully understand her world, he realized he wanted to help her, no matter how complicated things got. The cruiser drifted in the quiet expanse of space as Damon inspected the damage on Kalina's wrecked ship. Sparks flickered from exposed wires, and the hull bore deep scorch marks from the crash. "This is going to take time," Damon said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your ship's systems are way more advanced than anything I've worked on before. Half of this stuff looks like magic to me." Kalina stood beside him, her posture as regal as ever despite the chaos of their situation. "Your technology is primitive, but your adaptability is impressive. If anyone can repair it, it is you." Damon gave her a sidelong glance. "Flattery isn't going to make this go any faster." Kalina tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing. "It is not flattery. It is fact. I chose you for a reason." Damon sighed, setting down his tools. "You keep saying that, but I'm just a guy trying to survive. This whole situation is way over my head." Kalina's expression softened slightly, and for the first time, there was a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "You underestimate your worth, Damon. Survival is a skill my people respect. In the Thalaran court, strength is measured not by wealth or power, but by the ability to endure." Damon paused, surprised by her words. "Endure? That's what you're doing, isn't it? Running away from everything because you want something better." Kalina's gaze dropped for a moment before she straightened her shoulders. "Yes, but endurance is not enough on its own. One must also know when to fight." Damon nodded, understanding her more than he cared to admit. "Well, if we're going to fight, we need a plan. And for that, I need to get your ship running again. Do you have any backup systems we can use?" Kalina stepped forward, brushing her hand over the ship's console. A holographic interface flickered to life, displaying a map of the nearby star systems. "This ship's core is still functional," she said. "We can use it to generate a shield pulse strong enough to disrupt their tracking systems, but it requires extensive repairs." Damon leaned in, studying the display. "All right, I think I can work with this. But we'll need parts, and I'm guessing your people aren't going to just hand them over." Kalina's lips curved into a faint smile. "I believe you humans call this scavenging." Damon chuckled despite himself. "I prefer resourceful." As they worked together, Damon found himself admiring Kalina's focus and precision. Despite their differences, she wasn't just bossy. She was determined, sharp, and willing to adapt. "Why do you trust me with this?" Damon asked as they finished rerouting a power conduit. Kalina paused, her golden eyes meeting his. "Because you have already proven your worth. You saved me not out of obligation, but because it was the right thing to do. That is the kind of ally I need." Damon smirked. "Well, don't expect me to call you wife just yet." Kalina arched an eyebrow. "Do not test my patience, Damon." Despite her words, there was a flicker of amusement in her tone. And for the first time, Damon realized they might actually make a good team. Damon's cruiser floated quietly in the shadow of a massive asteroid, its engines running at minimum power to avoid detection. Inside, Damon sat at the control panel, chewing on the end of a protein bar, while Kalina reviewed the ship's progress on a holographic display. "This isn't going to work if they keep tracking us," Damon said, leaning back in his chair. "We need to get them off our tail for good." Kalina's eyes flicked toward him. "That is precisely what I'm trying to prevent. But the Thalaran will not relent. They see my defiance as a threat to their authority. To them, I am an example that must be erased." "Sounds like a fun bunch," Damon muttered sarcastically. Before Kalina could respond, a loud ping echoed through the control room. Damon's heart sank as a holographic projection of a Thalaran official appeared on the main screen. The figure was tall and imposing, with glowing eyes similar to Kalina's but far colder. He wore ornate armor that glimmered with intricate designs. His voice was deep and commanding as he spoke. "Kalina of the Thalaran, this is your final warning," the figure said. "Return to us immediately or face the consequences. The human aiding you will not be spared." Kalina stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "I will not return. I have made my choice." The Thalaran official's expression darkened. "Your choice is irrelevant. Your actions endanger the balance of our people. The human is nothing but collateral damage in your rebellion. Do not test our resolve." Damon crossed his arms, glaring at the hologram. "Hey, collateral damage is standing right here, and I've got a name. Damon. Remember it." Kalina shot him a warning look, but Damon didn't back down. The official ignored him, continuing to address Kalina. You have 1 cycle to surrender yourself. If you do not, we will bring the full force of the Thalaran fleet upon you. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the cabin in tense silence. Damon let out a frustrated breath. So they're giving us an ultimatum now. That's great, just great. Kalina turned to him, her face unreadable. They are bluffing. They will not deploy an entire fleet for 1 runway. You sure about that? Damon asked, raising an eyebrow. Because they seem pretty serious to me. Kalina hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. They want to scare us into submission. That is how they maintain control. Damon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the console. Well, it's working. What's the plan, Kalina? You're the one with all the Thalaran wisdom. How do we outsmart them? Kalina's golden eyes met his, and for a moment, the determination he admired so much shone through. We fight their fear with action. We will complete the repairs, disrupt their tracking systems, and escape to neutral territory. And if that doesn't work? Damon asked, a hint of doubt in his voice. Kalina's voice was firm. Then we make them regret underestimating us. Damon couldn't help but smirk. Now that's the kind of plan I can get behind. As the cruiser drifted back into motion, Damon realized that despite the danger, he was starting to trust Kalina, and maybe even enjoy the challenge of outsmarting the Thalaran together. The stars stretched out before Damon as he piloted the cruiser through the dark void of space. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound, but inside, the tension was palpable. Kalina stood beside him, her golden eyes scanning the display as they neared the edge of a heavily guarded Thalaran station. "We need to be careful," Damon said, his hands tightening on the controls. "That's a military outpost. I'm not sure we'll get past the radar undetected." Kalina's gaze didn't falter. "We have no choice. We need supplies, and their station has what we need." Damon's brow furrowed. "So you're telling me we're going to sneak into a heavily guarded military base to steal parts? I'm all for being resourceful, but that sounds like suicide." Kalina's lips curled into a faint smile. "You underestimate your abilities, Damon. Trust me. I will guide you." Damon wasn't so sure, but he didn't have much of a choice. They were low on food and water, and the ship's systems needed parts they couldn't find anywhere else. The Thalaran station loomed ahead, a massive structure of dark metal and towering spires, each bristling with energy shields and weapons. Damon took a deep breath and began the approach, his fingers flying over the controls. Kalina's presence was steady beside him, offering quiet commands that helped him navigate the tight spaces around the station. As they neared the station's hangar, Damon saw the pulse of energy beams scanning the area. If they were detected, it would be over. "Ready?" Damon asked, his heart pounding in his chest. Kalina's voice was calm, almost soothing. "Do not worry. Follow my lead." With her guidance, Damon skillfully maneuvered the cruiser toward a dark, unlit docking bay. The energy scanners passed over them, but the ship's low-power mode kept them under the radar. Damon's hands shook as they neared the docking bay's entrance, but he forced himself to remain focused. They made it. The cruiser gently touched down, and the bay doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. Damon exhaled sharply, glancing at Kalina. "I can't believe we made it." Kalina's golden eyes sparkled with a quiet pride. "You doubted me." "I doubt everything when it comes to you," Damon muttered, shaking his head. Kalina turned to him, her expression serious. "Stay close. There are guards nearby. We cannot afford to be discovered." Damon nodded and followed her into the shadows of the hangar. They moved quickly, avoiding the lights and keeping to the edges of the walls. The station's interior was sterile and cold, the sound of distant footsteps echoing through the narrow hallways. They reached a storage room where Kalina knew they could find the parts they needed. Damon's heart raced as they hurried to collect the supplies, trying to be as quiet as possible. The last thing they needed was to be caught now. Just as Damon grabbed a power core, The sound of footsteps grew louder. Kalina's hand shot out, gripping his arm. "Hide." They ducked behind a large crate, holding their breath as two guards walked past, their armored footsteps thundering in the silence. Damon's pulse raced, but Kalina didn't move a muscle, her focus sharp. When the guards were out of sight, she gave Damon a nod, and they moved again, this time faster, toward the exit. As they made their way back to the ship, Damon couldn't help but be impressed. Despite the constant danger, Kalina had kept her cool. He had trusted her, and together, they had succeeded. When they were finally back inside the cruiser, Damon let out a long breath, staring at her with newfound respect. "I didn't think we'd make it, but you were right." Kalina gave him a small, satisfied smile. "You're learning." Damon shook his head, a smirk crossing his face. "I'm just glad I'm still alive." But deep down, he knew that their bond, however strange and unexpected, was growing stronger. Damon sat at the control panel, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. They had gathered the parts they needed, and Kalina's ship was almost fully repaired. The tension between them, though still present, had eased somewhat. They had survived, but now the real test was ahead. "Where do we go from here?" Damon asked, glancing over at Kalina, who was deep in thought. "You said something about neutral territory. Do you have a specific place in mind?" Kalina stepped up beside him, her expression resolute. "Yes. There is a planet on the outer rim, unclaimed by any major factions. It's a place where I can disappear and where they cannot reach me." Damon raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this? Sounds like a one-way trip." Kalina met his gaze, her golden eyes unwavering. "It's the only way. If we stay in Thalaran space, they will find us. And if we're caught..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Damon understood. He sighed and looked back at the map. "All right, so we head to this planet. But what happens if they catch up to us before we get there? We're not exactly in a position to outrun an entire fleet." Kalina's lips tightened. "That's why we have to be prepared. I've been thinking about that. We can use their own technology against them." Damon turned to her, intrigued. "How?" "We'll use the energy pulse system from my ship and enhance it." The cruiser shot through the darkness of space, the distant Thalaran fleet now disabled behind them. Damon could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins as the ship blasted forward, making a beeline for the distant neutral planet. He glanced at Kalina, who was calm, almost eerily so, her focus unwavering as she monitored the ship's systems. "You think they're giving up?" Damon asked, his voice tinged with nervous energy. Kalina didn't look away from the controls. "No, the Thalaran will regroup. They are not known for their patience, but they will not give up easily." Damon felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. Despite their success with the energy pulse, the reality of their situation was far from over. They weren't out of danger yet. "All right then," Damon muttered, tightening his grip on the controls. "Guess we better make the most of this head start." He pushed the throttle forward, the cruiser picking up speed as they headed deeper into space. The planet Kalina had mentioned was still a few hours away, and the idea of being pursued by an entire fleet made Damon's stomach turn. But there was no turning back now. As the hours passed, the tension only grew. Damon couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The silence inside the cruiser felt too heavy, the hum of the ship's engines almost deafening. Every passing second felt like a countdown, the threat of the Thalaran fleet looming larger with each minute. "We're almost there," Damon said, trying to steady his nerves. "Stay sharp." Kalina nodded, her eyes locked on the starred expanse ahead. "They will be waiting for us, but they will not be prepared for what we are about to do." Damon glanced at her, surprised by the fierce determination in her voice. "What do you mean?" Kalina's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no humor in it. "We will make them regret underestimating us. I will not let them take me back." The cruiser veered off course slightly, moving toward a cluster of asteroids. Damon raised an eyebrow, but didn't question her. "We'll hide in the asteroid field," she explained. "It will be easier to ambush them if they think we're trying to escape." Damon couldn't argue with that. It was a risky move, but it was their best shot. The asteroid field ahead was dense, with large rocks floating in seemingly random patterns. Damon expertly maneuvered the cruiser between them, his pulse quickening as the shadows of the asteroid swallowed them whole. Kalina kept her eyes on the sensors, waiting for any sign of the Thalaran ships. It didn't take long. The Thalaran fleet, now fully regrouped, appeared on their sensors, slowly advancing toward their position. Kalina's expression hardened. "They're closing in," Damon said, his voice tight. "Prepare yourself," Kalina replied, her tone like steel. "We fight now." Damon's fingers hovered over the controls, ready for whatever was coming next. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but Kalina had taught him to never underestimate the power of quick thinking and a little bit of luck. The first Thalaran ship emerged from behind an asteroid, its massive form blocking out the stars. Damon didn't hesitate. He slammed the controls forward, sending the cruiser rocketing toward the ship at full speed. Kalina's eyes flashed with a fierce intensity as she worked her console. "This is our moment. Let's give them a fight they'll never forget." The final confrontation had begun. The cruiser roared through the asteroid field, its engines at full power as Damon steered them straight toward the Thalaran ship. His heart raced, knowing that one wrong move could end it all. But Kalina was right beside him, her calm voice guiding him through the chaos. "Don't pull away," she said, her eyes locked on the radar. "They'll expect that. Hold your course." Damon nodded, pushing the throttle even harder. The Thalaran ship loomed larger, its dark form silhouetted against the backdrop of swirling asteroids. He didn't have much time to think. If they were going to make it out of this, they had to outsmart the enemy, and fast. With a sudden move, Damon veered the cruiser just as a blast of energy shot past them. The Thalaran ship fired again, but Damon expertly dodged, twisting the cruiser to avoid the attack. He could feel the ship's systems working overtime as the speed built up. Each turn, each maneuver a life-or-death decision. Kalina's fingers flew over the console, activating the ship's defenses. "Shields are up," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "Keep your focus. We can disable their weapons if we can get close enough." Damon gritted his teeth, eyes fixed ahead. "I'm ready. Just tell me when." As they drew closer to the Thalaran ship, the pressure in Damon's chest grew. The asteroid field was now a blur of rock and debris, and every movement felt like a gamble. "Now," Kalina shouted. Damon slammed the control panel forward, sending the cruiser into a high-speed dive just beneath the enemy ship's hull. The Thalaran vessel loomed above them, unaware of the human ship below. "Fire," Kalina commanded. Damon fired a burst from their weapon systems, aimed directly at the enemy's power core. The energy pulse hit its mark, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, the Thalaran ship shuddered, its lights flickering. The shields went down, and a massive explosion rang out, sending shockwaves through space. The ship began to drift, disabled and helpless. Damon exhaled sharply, barely able to believe what had just happened. That worked. Kalina's eyes glinted with a quiet satisfaction. "We caught them off guard. But don't relax yet. There are still more ships coming." Damon nodded, quickly adjusting course to escape the aftermath. He could already see more Thalaran vessels approaching in the distance. But now, they had the advantage. The Thalaran fleet was disoriented, and they were running out of time. "We'll make it," Kalina said, her tone unwavering. "This is the turning point." Damon didn't respond. He didn't need to. He had come to trust Kalina completely, and together, they would find a way out. As they made their final jump into the unknown, Damon looked over at Kalina. For the first time since their unexpected meeting, he felt a sense of peace. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were building something together. And as the stars streaked past them, Damon realized that this was just the beginning. They had both found something in each other they hadn't expected. And now, with the Thal-Aran fleet behind them, they were free to make their own future. Damon wasn't sure what it would hold, but for the first time in a long while, he was ready to find out.